I know they're sensitive to public opinion.
Welcome everybody to our fourth candidate forum in our series of 6 that we'll be doing. This is in collaboration, so the NAACP did it in collaboration with Tallahassee ALERT, which is African-American local election response team, along with the Tallahassee Urban League, the National Pan-Hellenic Association, the Providence neighborhood, Bond neighborhood, Frenchtown neighborhood, and Griffin Heights neighborhoods. And our intention on doing these forums was to ask questions that's specific to how these different races and candidates affect the African-American community, specifically, and of course, the community at large. We've done, as we said, this is the fourth one. They've been heating up as we've been going along. And the audience has also been growing as we've been going along. So I appreciate all of you all who are here, and also all the people that's watching live on Facebook. And so this evening will be, our moderator will be my good friend, my big brother, Chuck Hobbs. And he'll be going through some questions. And as we stated earlier, for those who are just getting here, we changed the format just a little bit. We're going to be allowing audience members to ask questions instead of us writing them on the note cards. All we ask is you be civil, you be respectful. That is not like a personal question. That is something that's going to affect, the entire community, or something that you think is going to affect the entire community, and that you keep it short. And you have one question. So think of that one question that you have instead of several, and please don't proliferate. Just kind of ask your question. So with that, we want to move right into it, and I want to introduce Chuck Hobbs, Charles Hobbs.
All right. Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, just like Brother Akbar said, we're going to have a good evening. We've got 2 wonderful candidates here. We've got the incumbent, Jeremy Matlow, the challenger, Mr. David Bellamy. We're looking forward to a robust debate, but we're also looking forward to respect throughout the debate. I know that the candidates will provide respect. We're also asking for each of the audience members. So I'm also the moderator, but I'm the bouncer too. So if you're being disrespectful, I will grab you, okay? All right, so let's have some fun. All right. I don't know how to ask my brother, Vaughn Wilson. There you go, I don't want to tear up his equipment. All right, there we go. All right, very good. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi. Good evening.
All right, I like to start this off by allowing the candidates to introduce themselves to the audience. So if we can, I will start with the incumbent, and then we'll go to Mr. Bellamy. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, and thanks everybody for hosting this tonight. Civic engagement is so important to really learn about the candidates, and this cycle, I think, is more exciting than a lot of cycles we've seen in the past. There's not a single incumbent that doesn't have a challenger, so we're really going to have an opportunity to see different viewpoints and different ideas. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jeremy Matlow. I'm a Tallahassee City Commissioner. I got into politics really just a few years ago. I was born on the south side of the city, raised by a single mother of 4 kids, and really just grew up in poverty, just really struggling. And we powered through that. I ended up deciding to stay in Tallahassee, start my family here, have two kids and a beautiful wife, and started my business, Gain Street Pies. When I really got into local business, I really started getting engaged in local politics. Different things that were concerning my neighborhoods, different things that were concerning our small businesses brought me to City Hall. And a lot of the times it just seemed like no matter how many people showed up, no matter how many people spoke, it was really just falling on deaf ears. A lot of the decisions were already made, and if you weren't part of the club, if you weren't in the powerful elite circle, your opinion didn't really seem to matter, and that was wrong. We decided if they weren't going to listen to us, we needed more everyday people just stepping up and putting their names on the ballot. I was fortunate to win in 2018. I won by 300 votes, and we continue to grow our coalition. But this election is going to be simple. There's 2 distinct choices in this election, and I'm the only candidate up here who is empowered to do what needs to be done in our city. Are we going to continue to allow big money, special interests to flood huge dollars into campaigns and then take out millions of dollars in public benefit at the expense of the rest of us? Or are we going to support the candidates who are running because they want to see Tallahassee be a better place. They want to see the issues in our neighborhoods finally addressed, and they just want to be heard and see that put into action. So I appreciate my opponent, Dr. Bellamy, for joining the race. It takes a lot to put your name on the ballot. It takes a lot to get out here and campaign. It's not easy for anyone, so that should be respected as well. But I look forward to a great debate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Bellamy. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
sir, and thanks for putting this on, everybody. We need more of this so we can fight less for name recognition and more for informed voters. So thanks for putting this on. I'm David Bellamy. My family's been here since about 1918 when my father, great-grandfather was brought down to take over and start the sociology department at FSU. And we've been here ever since. I love this town. I'll never leave it. My mother was the mayor, Carol Bellamy, in the late 70s, early 80s. And I learned from her how to serve your community in a leadership role. And I learned from her how you had to make sure that everybody in your city was treated well. I became a police explorer in 1984 when my mom took me to a meeting there and started serving the community at the age of 14. I became a police officer serving my community that way in 1990. And now I'm a orthopedic surgeon who serves my community, taking care of our sick. I love this town, but I started noticing that when I would go into areas that used to be my zone, areas off of Lake Bradford, areas off of Alabama Street, from 30 years ago, it looked like time had stood still. It looked like you were stepping out of a time machine. Nothing had happened. And that really angered me. I realized that for years we had the highest violent crime rate in the entire state and the poorest zip code in the entire state. And I got to where I said, someone's got to fix this. And Jeremy came along, and I liked his message. I liked that he said he was going to help the poor, he was going to help with crime, he was going to help improve the quality of life, and I voted for him. But as time went on, I began to believe that he wasn't achieving any of that. And I thought much of it was due to his style of leadership. One thing I learned from my mother, that you had to work with everybody. I still have patients to come to my office and say, I had a meeting with your mom when she was the mayor. I didn't get anything I wanted out of it. But I left that meeting liking her, respecting her, and willing to work with her again. And we have got to get back to that. We must get back to that. My mother and Hurley Rudd had a love-hate relationship that, as a kid, I thought was more love. Maybe now it was more hate. But they had a heated race for the house, and Hurley won. But when Hurley needed his knees replaced, he came to my dad. We've got to get back to that kind of relationship. Let me dispel one thing. It's already been a little alluded to, and who's connected and who's not. I have known John Daly since his father was the superintendent of schools or on the school board. I forget which one. His dad and my mother were friends, so yes, I know John. But John didn't recruit me to run. John didn't ask me to run, and I'm not running to make John more powerful. On the same lines, although it's been reported in some websites that I was recruited by the chamber, no one recruited me. I decided to do this on my own. Matter of fact, the only relationship I've had with the chamber is when they turned me down for Leadership Tallahassee in about 2006. So I can assure you, I'm a grown man and I can make my own decisions. I'm running for Tallahassee City Commission because I want to make this a better place for everyone.
Very good. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's get right to it. All right, the first question I have, I'm actually going to send to Mr. Bellamy. And I would like for you to please provide a specific policy from the incumbent that you believe negatively impacted African Americans and explain what you would have done differently.
So it's a little hard to pick out one he's responsible for because, again, I feel bad saying this sitting next to him. There's not much that he's been able to achieve. You can't say that there is a policy that he's responsible for. I do think that one thing that is hurting this community that I think could be focused on differently is affordable housing. He's voted against affordable housing about 4 times. I know he says he wants it. I believe he probably does want it. But it seems like if he can't have it the way he wants it, we're not going to have it at all. We have got to fix our affordable housing problem. Just last month or 2 weeks ago, there was a vote on a new development on the south side. And because it involved expanding the USA, I believe, Jeremy voted against it. We have got to get more housing. We're expected to get 30,000 more house needs in the next 15 to 20 years. That cannot be done without allowing more building. I understand that it takes cutting down trees, but if you put me in front of a pine tree and a poor child who has no home and no food, I will pick out the child every day and twice on Sunday. We have got to focus on affordable housing, even if it means compromising on what you want.
Commissioner, you get an opportunity to rebut your challenger's statement.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bellamy. There's a lot to rebut there because, frankly, so much of it was not true. I've never opposed an affordable housing project. If you can cite one, I'd be happy to discuss whatever you're referencing and provide my opinion. Secondly, I've been a champion for affordable housing. I was the person who said when Blueprint destroys housing like they did building FAMU Way, almost 27 low-income units that will never be that affordable again. I was the one who said Blueprint has the responsibility to replace those units one by one. I led that charge. I was not leading the charge to spend $27 million on luxury stadium improvements or $80 million on a Northeast Gateway for wealthy developers that are flooding money into local elections. So, I mean, that's just patently untrue. But I will ask my opponent, I challenge, he said that we need to be able to work together. I 100% agree with that. I've seen hundreds of people show up in public comment opposing the Doak Campbell Stadium. Nobody wanted to work with them. Nobody even wanted to accept a compromise to bring it down to $10 million. I've seen hundreds of people show up from Killearn concerned about the Northeast Gateway going to dump traffic in their neighborhoods. Nobody wanted to work with them. Nobody wanted to compromise on that road project. Time and time again, the public comes to our public meetings and speaks out, and it falls on deaf ears. When the people, and it's the real estate interests, it's the developers, it's the bankers, the people who are flooding money into my opponent's campaigns, when they come, they don't even have to show up to the public meeting. They just seem to get it votes the way they want just from the beginning. There's a fundamental problem with the way we do politics in local government. It's not serving the interests of the people. If my opponent wants us to come together and represent everybody and have honest dialogues, I welcome that, but I would submit he picked the wrong race to get into.
Commissioner Matlow, I want to follow up with a comment that you made, and I'm going to throw it back to Dr. Bellamy, which is regards to the Doak Campbell project. Can you explain to the audience, as well as those who are watching live via Facebook, what your position was on that and why it is you voted in the way that you did? And then Dr. Bellamy, I'm going to ask you to follow up with, had you been in office at that point in time, what your decision would have been on that same measure. Commissioner Matlow?
Sure. Doak Campbell was the most egregious waste of taxpayer funds that we've seen in the last decade. With only a week's notice, it was put on the agenda of the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency to give $20 million to really shore up luxury stadium seats and improvements. Yes, some basic infrastructure, but the boosters are putting in something like $100 million. We all know money's fungible and it can move around. And the bottom line is they could have funded this themselves. Where did that money come from? We didn't have it, we borrowed it. That added $7 million more to the taxpayers to cover. So now in the tax that's gonna be collected over the next 20 years, 6 or 7 years of money has gone to Doak Campbell. That money was meant for economic development. That money was meant to help small and locally owned businesses. And I'm not ashamed to say my success is because of government help. When I started my business, I didn't have enough money to get open. We went to the CRA. At that time, they allowed $10,000 small loans to businesses in the CRA district. And because of that loan, I was able to open my business. We've grown to over 100 employees since then. We've done good work through OEV with these dollars, helping small local owned business, especially during COVID and Cedar. I see Von Wilson here today. I believe his business was one of the businesses who's broadcasting this today that was helped by that. When we take money and give it to people who don't need it, we're taking it out of the pockets of people who could take that money, put it to good use in our community, and grow our economy. That was a bad decision. It was wrong, and everybody involved with it should be ashamed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Bellamy?
I don't think anybody in the city or the county, for that matter, that voted for Blueprint thought any money would ever go to the FSU boosters. I would have voted against that. That was not a good idea. But I think a better leader could have been able to accomplish a compromise or do away with it entirely. People ask me, well, what about FAMU? And I said, well, that's different. FAMU was on the verge of being condemned. And if we had lost FAMU football to Orlando, my bet is it would never have come back. That was a need. I agree, the boosters could have raised the money. On that Friday, they were giving a report to the trustees saying they were going to be able to raise $1 million, no problem. On Monday, they were asking for $20 million from the city. So I agree that the FSU could do without it. But I think a good leader could have worked out a compromise with other leaders to get it down to 10 million or nothing. At least, if you couldn't get it down, we should have demanded more in return. I know, for instance, that the medical school is always looking for places to treat patients. They're not attached to a hospital. It's not a classic medical school, so they don't really have patients. They're looking for places to be. And we're about to have a psychiatry residency come to town that will have 6 residents. With 6 residents will probably come 6 attendings. That's 12 doctors that could serve anywhere in the city. And all you need for a psychiatry office is a room and a secretary. I would have thought we could say, I tell you what, you call the med school and you make sure that they'll supply doctors for 6 clinics and we'll pay for everything. That's something that could have helped. We all know mental health is terrible in Tallahassee. I know that rich people can't get mental health in town. I can guarantee you that poor people can't get it. We understand that there's a huge level of chronic stress and anxiety in areas with high poverty and high crime where you don't know where the next disaster will come. We know those folks have higher blood pressure. We know they have higher cortisol levels. The impoverished areas are in dying need for mental health, and that's something that I think we could have easily traded with FSU because it would have cost FSU nothing to supply those doctors. The other thing is that when you're trying to work on a compromise, you've got to be willing to work with the people in charge. The main person, if we could have convinced the booster president to accept less money or ask for 10 million instead of 20, it might have happened. But Jeremy wouldn't even talk with the boosters president. You've got to be willing to communicate with people you don't like if you want to get any kind of compromise.
Commissioner?
I just want to follow up on that because it seemed to imply it was the booster president's money. I reject that. Does he automatically get 10 or $20 million as long as we negotiate with him? That's absolutely absurd. But I would say this is the first time I've heard Dr. Bellamy publicly oppose the funding. We heard candidates from all sorts of other races come and show their position while the vote was happening. There was an ample opportunity for Dr. Bellamy to weigh in at that time. But knowing his position now, I'd be happy to draft a letter asking the boosters and FSU to return the money and would love to have you sign on to that letter.
I'd be happy to sign it. And I'm not saying that he's entitled. He's not entitled to any money. But if you could have gotten the boosters to say, how about we compromise and make it 10, we would have won by giving the same we gave FAMU. At the time, 10 was looked at as a palatable compromise. By then, 0 was too far out of the barn. That should have been worked on the second meeting. But when you wait till the third meeting and start blowing things up, it doesn't gain us anything. Matter of fact, it cost us more money because then we had a hostile workplace complaint that we had to deal with, which cost us another $14,000. Now, granted, the business that was hired by the city to tell the city whether it was culpable or not surprisingly said the city was not. But they did say that the communication there was bad and that Jeremy and the head of Blueprint needed to have a mediator present or a moderator to help them communicate. I'm a grown man. I've never had anybody tell me I need a moderator to deal with anybody.
All right, very good. Gentlemen, going to move on. Commissioner Matlow, this next question, I'm going to start with you. And this is definitely right up your alley, what are some food insecurity solutions for the city of Tallahassee that do not require residents to grow their own food in community gardens?
Excellent question. One is just location and access. It's absurd that we have neighborhoods that don't have grocery stores within walking distance. I can remember being a child, 5, 6 years old, shopping at the Harveys and walking all the way down by the junkyards with my mom carrying bags. That's miles. You know, I can remember the kind people that pulled over their car and saw us and gave us rides home. This is really what's happening. This is what people are going through. Poverty is so expensive. It's not just the access to the grocery store, it's the transportation to get there. When going to the grocery store becomes an all-day affair, you can't go to work today. And that's the type of understanding our government lacks when they're setting policy. I was the one who proposed If the private sector is not going to bring a grocery store, the local governments don't just have a desire to, they have a responsibility to make sure everybody in Tallahassee has access to grocery stores. So whether that's publicly owned or co-opted and supported, it's absurd to say we can bring fancy sidewalks, we can bring underground utilities for developers, for developments that haven't even been built yet, when we have so much struggle in our neighborhoods and basic infrastructure not provided in our neighborhood. So first and foremost, I would work on transportation and locations of grocery stores and put them there by any means necessary.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Bellamy, same question. Food insecurity. What are some of your ideas with regards to how to keep it so that residents aren't necessarily required to grow their own food, and particularly on the south side of town, and particularly African-American communities?
Well, it's sad when you ask that question, you have to add, and don't say just grow your own. That shouldn't even be something we have to discuss. No one else needs to grow their own food. Why would we expect people in the poverty areas to do it? I'm going to mention this a lot. It comes down to jobs. People with money do not have food insecurity. There's food deserts and there's food insecurity. Food deserts are hard to fix for the poor. If you don't have a car, if you can't afford gas, it doesn't matter if the grocery store is 10 blocks away or 10 miles away. The store on Alabama Street is a great idea. And if you live down on Callaway, it's going to be super for you. But if you live on Preston Street, it might as well be across town. Because when it's 8 at night and you've got to go get some food, and you realize the kids are hungry and you've only got a little money in your pocket, it's a lot quicker and shorter to walk to McDonald's and get cheap food that's made poorly, high fat, low calories, and that's what you end up doing. The solution to this is to make it so that people can get where they need to go, either through public transportation or, more realistically, because that won't run at night, you need to provide jobs so people can get where they need to go. I used to live in Buckhead. It was a 30-minute round trip to go to the grocery store. That was without going inside it. I can guarantee you my family never went hungry because I had a car that worked. It all comes down to poverty. Even if you're making $15 an hour at a full-time job, that's only about $31,000 a year. National poverty level is $21,000. The Organization for Women's Health has a scalable poverty level for realistic poverty, and they place it in an area like Tallahassee at about 41,000. So we don't need jobs. We don't need minimum wage jobs. We need careers. We had the opportunity for the Honda Jet Company to come to, this is, Jeremy had nothing to do with this, but we had the opportunity for Honda Jet to come to Tallahassee and build at the airport. They were going to build jet planes using labor that came from the poorest area in town. Now, I'll admit they'll have a lot of engineers. They'll bring all kinds of folks from out of town, but this would have been a career for people with pensions, benefits. And the city said no, because the very people that say they want to help the poor really mean they only want to help the poor if it's absolutely no skin off their back. Because when you start talking about bringing an industry here that might actually employ people with jobs you can be proud of with room for growth, they say no. We've got enough people that say they want to help the poor. We need more people that are willing to help the poor and understand that you can't help them with a little skin off your own back. We've got about 17 corporations that OEV is talking to that have us on the top 5 lists of cities they want to go to. Big corporations with real jobs, not an entry-level job at a big box store. If they want to come here, many of them want to go to Innovation Park, which was built for industry. They want to go to the airport, where all you have to cut down are man-planted pine trees. We're not talking about patriarchal oaks. We have got to be willing to accept those companies to come here. And if it means helping them with a utility break, then you need to look at the return on the investment. I do not like corporate welfare. I do not like helping a rich company that doesn't need it. But if it ends up employing 100 people that now no longer suffer from food insecurity, then it's the price of doing business. That's why we lost Honda Jet. We cannot be in a position to lose the next one. You employ people, give them money, you solve food insecurity.
Dr. Bellamy, perfect segue to the next question, which is, and I'll give it to you first and then bounce it over to Commissioner Matlow. What steps can the city of Tallahassee take to ensure that lower income residents are not being displaced by ongoing development?
Well, again, I'll go back to it being careers, not jobs, careers. I'm not a developer, and I have not been involved in building big areas and displacing people, but it's my impression that people with money rarely get displaced. If you make a neighborhood successful, if you make the city bring up the appearance of a neighborhood to the rest of the city, if you give the citizens money in their pocket, all of a sudden it's harder to come in and displace those people. But you also need a commissioner who is consistent on saying when it's not okay to move in and gentrify. Jeremy, when they tried to or successfully took away the trailer park way out Adams Street, you saw Jeremy there protesting, you saw him donate money, he made sure everybody knew he donated money to him. But when Costas's place on Adams Street was bought by a developer who then gave businesses about a week notice to move out, including an African-American church, Jeremy wasn't there defending them. Maybe because the person doing it's his good friend and campaign supporter. If it's bad when it's people on South Adams Street, it's bad when it's your friend on Adams Street closer to town. You've got to be consistent. And the other issue is you've got to be willing to let the city grow. There's two ways to grow. You either do urban infill or you allow the USA to expand some so we get our utilities further out so we can build further out. Jeremy's a big believer in urban infill. That means putting something on every postage stamp of land in Tallahassee. That means taking every lot that can hold something and put a condo on it. And that means going into areas that are poor, that have poor property, and buying it up and putting housing there. We have got to give the developers somewhere else to go so they'll quit chipping away at our neighborhoods. Carroll's Corner is a prime example. I wouldn't be surprised if they wouldn't be buying up every house there to change it eventually if they had somewhere else to build. We've got to be, I don't want to tear down more trees. I don't want to expand the USA, but we have to be realistic. If you want 15,000 houses over the next 10 years and you want urban infill, get ready for the poor to be displaced.
Commissioner Matlow, response.
The poor are our neighbors. It's all of us as one community. But when we talk about displacement, we need to lead by example. We have road projects funded by local government, Blueprint, tearing down low-income housing, displacing people at the tax dollars' expense. Dozens and dozens and dozens of units. We need to put money directly back into those. But I can already tell Dr. Bellamy is a cheerleader for big developers. If we didn't give $100 million to build, by the way, when we talk about new development, what's being proposed in Wallani isn't affordable. These new developments he's talking about are not affordable, and I'll give you a reason why. We asked for them to be affordable when they started Canopy, and affordable at that was 80% of the median income. So that's, you make a little less than average, but that's not really low-income people. That's people who still make a decent salary. The developer came back to us and said, we can't sell houses to that income. Can we raise the limit to 100%? That's median income. There's nothing affordable about that. They're building market rate housing at the expense of you, all of us, our taxpayers. They're burying power lines, they're building fancy sidewalks, they're building fancy roads, and they haven't even built a single house yet. Meanwhile, they're flooding money into Dr. Bellamy's campaign, and he's trying to convince us that he's going to do something different. He's going to be different than the status quo when he's taking money from the same developers and real estate interests who have controlled our city for decades. If you want to see something different, you have to do something different. You have to elect different people who are willing to look people who can write $1,000 checks. He knows tons of them, apparently. But you have to be able to look them in the face and say, no, you're not going to get everything you want from our government. There are other people that live in our community too. They're voters. 50% of our city either lives in poverty or they're living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to get by. If you took Doak Campbell, that should have been $14 million that went to everyday people. But our budget doesn't match our priorities. So tell me you want to invest in affordable housing. Tell me providing public housing and access to housing that people can actually afford. Tell me that using our public dollars to let people own the land and let small developers, there's people in this room that build houses. Why aren't we funding them to build houses in the community and getting people who need help into housing instead? We're not. We're giving our money away to the rich and powerful. And you can say it You can spin it, but at the end of the day, are you going to be on the side of the people? Are you going to be the side of all your friends on the commission who are doing the things that are hurting the people? That's what we need to have today. And it doesn't start with just local government. Dr. Bellamy has donated over $30,000 to Republican candidates and causes in just the last few years. And he's not ashamed of it. That's great. I mean, I pride myself in people know exactly where I stand on the issues, whether they don't have to question where I'm coming from or why. I think Dr. Bellamy is the same type of guy. When he was questioned about supporting Ron DeSantis, he said he would do it again. When he donated money to flip the House, that's Congress, to be controlled by Republicans and not Democrats, that's hundreds of millions of dollars that wouldn't flood into our state that the people he supported didn't want to get invested in our community. That is the ARPA funding that's flowing into local businesses. That is the $6 million I champion for the homeless. So I stand proudly on my record of fighting for money for the people that need it, and all I'm hearing is platitudes.
So we both donated to Republicans. We both received money from Republicans. We both donated to Democrats, both received money from Democrats.
I've never donated to a Republican.
Yeah, you have against, you did against Bill Montford. The donors.
Backcheck.org. I see the press. Y'all make sure that's.
You have also received money from people in the developing area, and you received more this time than you did the first time around. So if you're saying I'm selling my soul because I took money from them, using that argument, you're selling yours too, just at a lower price. Every day I go to work and I think I'm going to have a nice day and see people and talking about their knees. And once in a blue moon, someone will come in with a knee that hurts, and it turns out they've got cancer. And I've got to tell somebody who just thought they had a meniscal tear that they've got cancer and they're going to die from it. And I walked in thinking I was just going to inject their knee. That's not terribly uncommon. I think I can tell Ed Murray he didn't buy my soul when he donated to my campaign. To reference Wulani, when last month the vote was against a South Side housing development. Can you imagine somebody that actually wants to build housing on the south side of town? That's what was voted against. You cannot have a housing shortage and affordable housing at the same time. We had somebody that wants to build on the south side. The other problem with our housing costs, in Tallahassee, if you wanted to build a development that was low income and you bought the land, the best you could probably do was $50,000. By the time you get the permitting done, by the time you get the road into it, by the time you get the plumbing into it, you've now invested another $60,000.
No, let's not do that. Please allow each of these gentlemen to respond and make their comments with no comments from the crowd. There will be an opportunity for everybody who wants to ask a question. Go ahead and finish your comment, Dr. Bellamy.
So now you've invested $110,000 and you haven't even broken ground. And because of the way the permitting system works, it may take you 2 to 3 years before you can even break ground. Now you build the cheapest house you can for about $140,000. Now you've got $240,000 house before you've even put it on the market. That is unaffordable. For $240,000, you've got to make about $50,000 a year after taxes for that to pay, for that mortgage to be 1/3 of your income. Include taxes, it's probably around $70,000. Median income in Tallahassee is $25,000. Most of our city employees don't make $50,000 to $70,000. So that is one of the problems with housing in this city. The city needs to get involved in making the land available, doing the permitting so they can have built what they want, and then bid it out for a fixed profit margin to builders so you get a guaranteed quality product and it can actually be built for $140,000. Now you're talking affordable properties.
Thank you, Dr. Bellamy. Commissioner Matlow, you raised an issue when you were initially responding with regards to the blueprint. I know that you're involved in some litigation right now with that. Would you mind describing to the audience, as well as those who are watching and participating via Facebook, what that litigation is about and what you hope to achieve?
Yeah, sure. So Attorney Marie Maddox filed suit this morning against the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency. The background on that is large, major projects, such as the Northeast Gateway, that ballooned from $40 million to $80 million, that initially was only going to serve 500 cars per day, were being forced through. And as they changed, people were coming to us and saying, we don't understand the process. Staff comes to these events, but they say they can't change anything. Then there's the IMC, and then there's you, but nobody can change any of this. So who's in charge? Well, there is a process, and the IMC, which is the city manager and the county administrator serving collectively, they have a very distinct role in making recommendations and certain approvals. The Florida Constitution enshrines the right to know what your government's doing, public meetings laws. But the IMC, they take the position that they're not subject to Florida law, that they don't have to meet in the public. So when some of these decisions are being made and recommended, such as the Northeast Gateway, people were asking, what was the IMC saying about Doak Campbell before anybody even knew about it? We don't know because they don't tell us. And it seems many people believe that they're not following the law. So this lawsuit is injunctive relief to say, let the people know what's happening with their tax dollars. That it's their right to follow it back to the very beginning, see every meeting, every decision, the entire decision making process. Like, it's no secret that there's problems at Blueprint. And I've been a constant critic of Blueprint. As Dr. Bellamy pointed out, I've been so critical that the director filed a bogus HR complaint against me, saying I was harassing him. An independent investigator found that not only did it, harassment is gender, race, these types of protected classes, not only did it not meet the legal definition of harassment, she said it doesn't even meet the textbook definition of harassment. We didn't find any proof of anything that's alleged against Commissioner Matlow. So this is what you're seeing from this agency. And if they had HR policies, if they had professionals, if they had policies like the city and county, we wouldn't be going through this. So we need to pull Blueprint and make it just as accountable as your city government, just as accountable as your county government, because there's hundreds of $millions being spent. People are unhappy about why they're being spent, and they don't have the information to learn how. We're going to get them the information.
Very good. Gentlemen, just a quick question for both of you. Florida statutes allow for at least 2 citizen board members on the Community Redevelopment Agency board. Would you support restructure of the CRA board to include citizen members? Dr. Bellamy, then Commissioner Matlow.
Yes.
Yes, all right.
Yeah, I would absolutely support this, but I'd also, if you're unhappy with the CRA members, you need new city commissioners. And I've been a constant fighter for the neighborhoods in the CRA district. I would support more members coming on board. But at the end of the day, we need a majority that cares, wants to put the money into the neighborhoods and the people that need it most, and not continue to dump into large student housing developments and those sorts of things.
Very good. All right. Dr. Bellamy, next question for you. Start with you, then we'll kick it over to Commissioner Matlow. What can the city do differently in sheltering homeless people?
So it turns out that every homeless person costs society about $1,000 a day per person. I used to think that was a crazy amount. And I started doing the math in my head. The police have to respond to a lot of calls with them. That's extra cost to the city. Paramedics and firemen have to respond to extra calls. That's money to the county. If you have a business with homeless in front of it, it hurts your business. If you have a property with homeless in front of it, it hurts the sale value. But also just the medical care. I've had homeless patients that were in the hospital for 6 weeks who could have left after 2 days if they had somewhere to go. So the first step in homeless management is realizing not doing anything is not free. If you know you're spending that much money, spend it in an organized fashion. I think we should look into some sort of area that is built for homeless. They can camp if they want, they can live inside if they want, but a place where they can have a safe quality of life, but they're also not on the street. It's not acceptable to allow people to live in the woods in large groups of people when half of it's because of mental illness. That's not being humane. We wouldn't tell a cancer patient who didn't understand what they had that they're just going to go live in the woods till it goes away. Why do we do it with mental illness? To say it's okay to allow that to take place is not okay. LA killed about 60 homeless people a few years ago with the hepatitis A outbreak in one of their tent cities. How do you get hepatitis A? You get it from going to the bathroom, not washing your hands, and then touching out someone else's food. That's what happens when you don't have basic sanitation sites. So to just do nothing is not okay. We have the resources to do it, and we should do it. It's costing us money anyhow. If you go out to the little homes that Kearney built, it's a fabulous example of where you can take at-risk people and give them a stable place to live, and you see them thrive there. One of the best things the Kearney Center does is it provides mental health counseling. When I was a medical student, we had to do a month in the inpatient psych ward, and none of those folks wanted to take their medicine, but everyone did if you asked. And at the Kearney Center, you're getting reminded to take your medicine, and I bet most of them do. The other problem is if you live in a tent under I-10, you probably don't have a CVS card. And the Kearney Center helps them get their medication. My uncle was schizophrenic and died in LA, and the family didn't know for 3 months. So I understand it's not okay to let people live that way. It costs us money. We might as well have an organized manner to deal with it.
Thank you, Dr. Bellamy. Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you. Well, first, what we're not going to do is we're not going to set up camps and continue to ask people to live outside. That's failed all across the country. It was disastrous in St. Pete. Studies have shown that 98% of people experiencing homelessness would move indoors if you allow them. But what's happening in Tallahassee is, again, it's wrong. The homeless have been under attack. During COVID, Mayor John Daley office worked to tear down shelters at Lake Ella when people had nowhere else to go, the only shelters they had. They continued to raid encampments without providing any real alternative for people to go. But what we know from what works is when you put people in housing first, when you don't worry about trying to get them a job first or handle their mental illness, put them indoors first, it works. And we brought this up during COVID. I was a huge advocate for the amount of funding needed. It was something like $8 million initially up front to house every chronically homeless and veteran in our community. There was a lot of pushback from my colleagues on that issue. We did end up achieving approximately $6 million for homeless services, but it's not enough. We can't continue to treat the homeless as they're not our neighbors. They're not a problem that needs to be solved. These are people that we live with. These are people that live in our communities. And yes, there is a lot of mental illness that's part of it. I have the same issues in my family. My brother is a schizophrenic. He goes in and out of homelessness, in and out of jails. It's a drain on the system, and we help you where you can, but it's a struggle when people aren't taking their medication. My father was an alcoholic, and yes, he was in the hospital with cirrhosis of the liver before he died, as the hospital was trying to dump him at a homeless shelter, and I had to go in and rescue him. The way we treat people matters. The way we spend our dollars matters, and it just breaks my heart in a community where we have enough resources to house every homeless person. And I know some people don't want them. They may be frightened or those sorts of things. And you can't challenge somebody's feelings. How they interact with people is their own right. But it would have cost less than Doak Campbell Stadium to house every chronically homeless and veteran in our community. We continue to make the wrong priorities. We need to build a stronger coalition of leaders. This isn't just about my race. This is about city and county leaders who want to fight for the people, who want to fight for the causes that matter. So I'm glad Dr. Bellamy agrees with me on another position. I just don't know. The only contrast I've seen is humongous supports from developer and special interests while we're being funded by everyday people. So I'm just really challenged to see how he would vote differently on any positions that we've taken. Thank you.
Yes,
So
sir,
if I could add, I know there's a lot of studies where they interview people in better environments than they normally live, but I have the Dave Bellamy study where as a policeman, I spent time with people in homeless encampments and I answered their calls and I talked to them. And the overwhelming sentiment was that's where they wanted to live. They did not want to be around other people. They did not want to be put in some sort of complex. If you see a homeless person walking down the street with a backpack, he's not going to the shelter, I can promise you, because he can't bring his belongings in there. Maybe a backpack, maybe that's an exaggeration. A grocery cart, he can't go, he will not go to the shelter. In my years as a policeman, I probably took 4 people to the shelter because the people that want to be in the shelter are at the shelter and the people that don't want to be in the shelter are out. So I'd still say we've got to be reasonable in the expectations. And if they want to live that way and we can provide them a good quality of life and keep them healthy and they prefer to live in a tent, I am okay with that. I'd rather them live inside, but we have to be realistic. We can't apply what's important to us to what they think is important to them. They have a different view of what they want. I know this. I've dealt with them. I've worked. They're my patients. Again, when you have a patient in the hospital for 6 weeks, you get a lot of time to talk to them.
Yes, sir, Dr. Bellamy. I appreciate that. Commissioner Matlow, earlier this year, the Leon County Sheriff's Office, under the leadership of Sheriff Walt McNeil, they issued the Anatomy of a Homicide study. Got a lot of media attention, some social media attention, but obviously one of the things we're dealing with in this city, it's across America, but we're definitely dealing with it in this city like you, and like I grew up here, and it just was not this way 35, 40 years ago, with bodies being dropped, people shooting and being killed, things of that nature. What are some of your solutions to the crime and specifically the gun violence that seems to just have gotten out of control, here in Tallahassee, Leon County?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I applaud the sheriff for taking the initiative on that report. Yes, it illustrated what we've been saying for probably at least over a decade now, as we really look at, poverty being the root cause of violence. And at the end of the day, we need to get people out of poverty and into a lifestyle in a pathway to success. That's a long-term opportunity that we have to do, and it's every dollar we spend. The City Commission did vote this year to add $1 million in violence interruption local programs, whether that be justice reform, whether that be direct violence intervention systems where people go into the communities and speak with people and really have that hands-on approach. I think it definitely has to be locally based. We need people who are in these communities, that live in the communities, leading them. And it has been an ongoing problem. Like when I was a kid, people were pulling guns on the basketball court. That's always happened. We have to be able to get ahead of it. So it starts with funding the immediate need and trying to interject and connect with the kids that are struggling right now. When we're expelling people from school, that's their last lifeline that they have to responsible people sometimes that can help them. We have to turn away from that. Like when people are more likely to commit a crime, our solution is to shun them. We need to grab those kids. We need to hug them as tight as we can and say, we love you, and we need to take this in a different direction. But we can't treat violence through the scope of there's good guys and there's bad guys, right? We just got to get the bad guys. If we just get the bad guys, if we just get the bad guys, that doesn't work. And we've seen that doesn't work. And I will say, just to follow up on the last, on homeless services, people respond differently if you're a service provider who works with homeless every day and knows how to handle mental health crisis. We shouldn't be asking law enforcement to handle homeless issues because they're not trained to do it. So I would wager if a police officer was asking you if you want to go inside, you're likely to say no. Where may he be taking you? But if you're in the community and you've built trust with this person and they know you bring them food and they know you help them get medication and they know you're there to trust them, yes, they'll help you go inside. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Bellamy.
So again, it comes back to careers. Poverty and crime are evil twin sisters. And if you fix poverty, crime goes away. That's what we've got to do. When you don't have a job, you don't have a lot of hope, you end up doing things like that. Look at the number of kids that are getting caught taking guns to school that all of them claim they had no ill intent taking it to school. They were scared to get to and from school. How have we let our neighborhoods get to the point where a kid is scared to walk to school? And I think a lot of it comes back to treating every neighborhood with the same standard of care that the Northeast gets. Going down to Saxon Street tonight, look at how many lots have trash on it. I don't mean a little trash. I mean like a mattress, garbage bags. That wouldn't be acceptable anywhere else in this city. Why does the city allow it to occur down there? And I worry that when I was young, I didn't know what poor meant. I thought poverty meant you couldn't afford an Atari. For the younger folks in the crowd, that'd be a Nintendo now. but I thought it meant you couldn't afford an Atari. Until I became a policeman, I didn't realize poverty meant you didn't have food, you didn't have clothes. I couldn't comprehend poverty. I worry a child growing up on a street that gets no services from the city, who's across the street from a garbage heap, who hears gunshots every night. I worry that that child can't comprehend success. He can't comprehend something better. So you fix the crime and you end up you fix the poverty, you end up fixing a lot of this. The other thing is we've got to have a commissioner who every day goes to work and say, it is my job to fix poverty and crime in the city. It's the number one problem we have, overwhelmingly, crime and poverty. Fix poverty, you fix housing. Fix poverty, you fix food insecurity. We need somebody who looks at that every day as their job. And I would love transparency from Blueprint. But to fight an ineffectual battle against somebody that you can't get fired, at some point you've got to realize you've been beaten and move on to something you can change. Let me tell you, I have probably been around more people dying of violence than anyone in this room, unless you're a military veteran. I've been in the field when I was a policeman and they were shot and dying. I've been in the hospital in a controlled environment when they were shot and dying. And I've heard a lot of times they ask, what happened? What happened? Why? Why did this happen? I have never had one of them, as they die, reach up the sky and yell, why was Ben Pingree interviewed in a bar? We've got to focus on what's important to really fix things. And it takes somebody that's willing to say crime and poverty are what we're going to do to make our city a better place.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I would love to respond to that. We don't need a commissioner who thinks it's okay for public employees to be interviewed in a bar. That's inappropriate. Every public job should be open for everybody to apply for. You shouldn't hand select. And let's see, how did we end up in that bar? We ended up in that bar when Scott Maddox, former city commissioner, who's now in federal prison for accepting bribes and corruption, texted Mr. Pingree, cut the deal. Blueprint is yours. Take control of this billion-dollar agency. The same Scott Maddox, the same people who supported Scott Maddox, the same developers, the same special interests, are funneling money into Dr. Bellamy's campaign. He's taking that money and he went and hired Scott Maddox consulting firm. And he wants to tell us that things are going to be different. So yes, it is not acceptable to hire an employee in a bar. I hire employees in a bar. I own a bar. And I'll tell you, I interview more than one employee every time I hire a bartender. To say a city commissioner should be able to text somebody, the job is yours, and also to say, by the way, the city manager, Reese Goad, I got you, Reese Goad, I got you, Ben Pingree, I got you, Wayne Tedder, my job here is done. That's corruption. We went through a federal trial. People went to jail. It's wrong. And to make light of it like it's a joke, it's just unacceptable.
So I hired Reggie Cardozo, who worked for governance and left in 2008 to help run President Obama's campaign. I do think he helped Scott with his campaign for Attorney General in 2010, but after that, he ran Obama's re-election campaign. I figure if he's good enough for President Obama, he should be good enough for Jeremy and me. Also, if Reggie is the spawn of the devil, having worked with Scott, a bigger issue is, why did Jeremy hire somebody who worked for Reggie after all this occurred? Now, I have no problem with who worked for him. I'm saying that if it's that bad that I hired him to run run the campaign, it's that bad that you've let the fox loose in the hen house by hiring somebody that worked with Reggie. Reggie's not the devil. Reggie ran Obama's campaign. If it's good enough for Obama, it's good enough for me.
Brief rebuttal.
Yeah, just quickly, we're attacking a lot of people here. I'm saying the corruption directly related to Scott Maddox, putting people in position who control our government currently, that's wrong.
Well,
And
I
I'll
will say
continue
you
to do
directly said I hired Scott Maddox's lobbying firm when I hired Reggie.
Absolutely, you did.
All right. Gentlemen, let's move on to the next question. And this is going to be starting with Dr. Bellamy. Is dark money a problem in local elections? Perfect segue. Are there any measures that you would support to mitigate this issue?
So dark money is a problem in every election, and we can thank Citizens United for that. I don't know how you keep it out. I don't know how you legislate it out when the Supreme Court has said it's okay. But yes, dark money is a problem. Now, he's going to try to portray me as Mr. Dark Money, but he's the only one with a direct connection to dark money. He's right here. Max, his old campaign manager and good friend, is part of our Tallahassee, a PAC that does not have to release the names of its members. There is a direct connection with Jeremy and a PAC that uses dark money. It's the only person up on this table that we can say that about. I don't have a connection. I don't work with dark money PACs. So yes, it's a problem. I have no idea how to fix it now that the Supreme Court has said that it's okay to do it. But to label me with that when the example's sitting right here videotaping it, it's laughable that Jeremy would accuse me of being the dark money guy. Dark money took a whole other step when Jeremy and Max have helped get out-of-town money from out of state to help in local elections. Pandora's box has been opened when they started taking money from out of state, from people who can't even find Tallahassee on a map. So yes, it's a problem, but I don't know how to fix it.
Commissioner Matlow.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, but the good thing is money can't buy elections. Scott Maddox thought they could. JT Burnett thought they could. In the federal corruption trial, they bragged that all the commissioners will do what they want because they could buy their seats for $200,000. That's in text messages. You can go read the record. That's how our government has been operating, and that's exactly what we're going to change. Dr. Bellamy would like to single people out. I've always thought that dark money meant you didn't know who it was, but the issues with dark money are real because look what they do with it. In my first election, most of you probably got a mailer with my mugshot on it from charges that were completely dismissed, completely dropped. That's what they're spending their money on. They don't want to talk about how to spend $27 million at Blueprint. They don't want to talk about how we can move our community to renewable energy. They want to talk about how they can shame somebody, how they can attack local businesses with false information and put their employees through strife just for political gain, because they're not advocating for a position. They're advocating for their own special interests. And where do those interests go? It's online, talgov.com. Go check the checkbooks. The same folks that are running David Bellamy's campaign and flowing $1,000 checks, the same Chamber of Commerce power players, millions of dollars in return. They're getting millions of dollars of our money in return. And if you elect David Bellamy, that's not going to stop. If you elect people that think that's wrong, it will.
I'll just say that's not true. Unless Jeremy has a time machine, he can't predict how he'll vote. Again, I can tell people no. I deliver bad news all the time.
Thank you, Dr. Bellamy. And one last question before we open it up to the audience. It's been very patient and for questions that they may have for you two gentlemen. What is the main reason why you are running for this seat? For Commissioner Matlow, why are you running for re-election? Dr. Bellamy, why are you running and challenging Commissioner Matlow?
I'm running for re-election because our job is not done. I was elected on a grassroots progressive wave in 2018, and we've seen tremendous growth in the last 4 years. In 2020, we charged into the election cycle, defeating big money-backed incumbents like Brian Deloge in the county and Elaine Bryan at the city. The fact is, you can't just rely on big, powerful interests to back your campaign and win. You have to be able to connect with the voters. You have to start delivering for our neighborhoods. You have to start protecting our environment. You have to take these issues and put your money where your mouth is. You will know us by how we spend our dollars. I've heard a lot of conversations about poverty. I've seen a lot of people bring out charts and say, look how great we've done. But when I look at the neighborhoods I grew up in, the infrastructure looks exactly the same. And when I look at the voting records, I see $80 million going to the same donors for development that they should frankly be paying for themselves. The people who live here and pay taxes aren't getting their fair share. And until we rebalance that, the job is not done.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Bellamy.
I agree we're not getting our fair share because, again, we've got the highest crime rate in the state and the poorest zip code. I'm running in part because, as I said, when I go in the areas where I was a policeman 30 years ago, it's only gotten worse. First shooting that I handled as a policeman in the training program was at 1010 Basin Street. About 4 months ago, someone was murdered at 1010 Basin Street. About a month ago, someone was shot in the foot as he ran from assailants at 1010 Basin Street. It is unacceptable that we neglect these neighborhoods. I'm the chairman of the board at John Paul High School, and we have several Title I students there that are from the south side of town, that are from our impoverished area. I had one right off of Lake Bradford, who comes to school and we figure out he's only got 2 pairs of clothes and he can't afford to go to the laundromat once a week. So 3 days a week he's wearing dirty clothes, a mile from the Capitol. And I thought, how can a city that's not that big, in a city that's as well off as ours, how is that possible? Now, we fixed it for him, but there's untold number of kids that have to go to school in dirty clothes, not because their family's not proud. Pride's got nothing to do with it, but because they don't have money. Pride doesn't make the washing machine run. I've got another kid who's the oldest male in his family, and he's a big linebacker on the football team with my son. And he comes to school crying one morning because the night before he had to shuttle his siblings into the back room of the house because he heard gunfire that was too close. Again, a mile from the Capitol. And keep in mind, he didn't just hear gunfire. He could tell the gunfire was too close. He could tell the difference between the ones where he can let his siblings stay in the front and the ones where he needs to take his siblings into the back. That is unacceptable. Again, my mother taught me if you want to be the change you want to see. It's a cliche, but it's true. And I want to fix those areas.
Thank you, Dr. Bellamy. All right, with that, we are 1 hour in, so I think this is a perfect time. I'm looking for my brother Bruce that we can open up. I'm not sure how we're going to go about to make sure this is orderly. Again, remember that I am Chuck Hobbs. I've been proud to be the moderator, but I'm also the bouncer. If it gets a little too rough, I will come and snatch you off the mic. And I'm only half joking. So with that, okay, all right, very good. So we have 2 microphones that are available now. So go ahead and let's get to it.
It's only fitting that I suggest this change in format, that people with passion, can ask their questions and you guys would hear the passion in their voice. Listen, we all know that in Washington, we have special interest groups that determine how Congress people vote because that's who put them there, and even here in Tallahassee, I have seen 3-2 vote, 95, 96% of the time, 3-2 vote. So tell me creatively, and this is for both of you, what creative idea can you come up with that if we've got a 3-2 vote and it's locked all the time like that, and it's hurting the people in this community from receiving an issue that they want to see taken care of? What idea do you have when a 3-2 vote comes up?
Sure. First off, we need the people in the room to engage. Elected officials need to look the public in the eye when they make bad decisions. And also we have to continue to look for compromise where we can find it. I was the one who offered the $10 million compromise on Doak Campbell. I was the one who offered the compromise on the purchase of Town South. But the unfortunate truth of the matter is we are working with elected officials that don't want to compromise. When the mayor of Tallahassee, Dr. Bellamy's friend, doesn't like a conversation, he adjourns the meeting early. It's happened on 2 occasions. It's not about, can we talk it out? Can we come up with compromise? Some people just don't want to listen at all. And if that's their political style, if that's their political ambition, and all power runs through you, and you make intimidating phone calls to anybody who opposes you in the background, that's not a way we can ever get to honest 3-2s or try to find somebody else to flip over. Because unless we're honest about what we're trying to do in the public, nothing's gonna change. Unfortunately, for years and years and years, and we've accomplished a lot. Not all 3-2s are bad. We're on a lot of winning 3-2s. Dr. Bellamy said he couldn't think of anything positive I did in the Black community, but he celebrated the Alabama grocery store, which me and Diane Williams-Cox worked hand in hand to deliver for the people of Griffin Heights. So if you come from my record, know my record, but at the end of the day, Dr. Bellamy, if you want to change the 3-2 vote that helps people who live in poverty, that redirects money from special interests to the people, you should run for a different seat.
So first, if you want to reach compromise, the first step is be willing to compromise. And I don't think we've seen a whole lot of that. The other thing is you've got to have a working relationship with your peers. When you vote against someone for a ceremonial pro tem mayor position just out of spite, that doesn't help build a working relationship. The other thing is that if at the meeting where you were cut short, listen, I don't agree with bullying tactics. I don't believe anybody should have any greater authority over the other. But I think at that meeting, if you'd have gotten to your point and said what you wanted to do, instead of dragging all the history through the mud that every single person in that room knew, you could have had a discussion about asking either the Attorney General or the Inspector General, who I forget who we were trying to ask. I think it'd be a great idea to ask them if Blueprint needs to be acted out in the public's eye. But if you'd have gotten to that point right off the bat, instead of antagonizing half of the room, I think you could have maybe convinced them.
And just
I think you've got to change your tactics if you want to get things done.
I'm going to follow up on that because the history of what's happened in our agency is important. A lot of the public didn't know the history. I'm not sure all of my colleagues knew the history because we're not allowed to have meetings outside of the sunshine. I've never been able to discuss those issues with them. And I understand it's not good to hear that Scott Maddox told somebody to give a job. It's not good to hear that interviews were conducted in the bars. But I didn't do any of that. I'm just relaying what happened and how we need to make it better. And I did get to my point. But to stop the point from coming to a vote, the meeting was shut down short. And that wasn't the first time. When John Daly's redefining the lobbyists, who's a lobbyist and who's not. John Daly's previous campaign firm, Vancouver Jones, infamously evaded registering to lobby. Commissioner Porter signaled for, I believe, over 10 minutes to get an opportunity to speak to address that specific issue. I'm not sure why John Daly didn't want to discuss unregistered lobbyists, but he shut that meeting down short also. So this isn't a one-off. This isn't about me. It's happening to multiple people, and it's always from leaders who just don't want to have the conversations that are hard to have. We have to have hard conversations to make our community better.
We're going to take the next question.
Did you want to take one off the internet?
Okay, I have a question from Nicole Souza. She's asking, I would like to ask Dr. Bellamy how he can proudly vote for Ron DeSantis, a governor who has supported anti-LGBTQ legislation and yet run for a public office where some of his constituents are LGBTQ people who are negatively impacted by the governor's actions. How can the LGBTQ community trust him to represent them?
So I voted for him based on him being identified by the FMA, Florida Medical Society, as somebody who was good for the delivery of medicine in Florida. He sided with doctors when hospital lobbyists and insurance lobbyists tried to fight against doctors. That's why I did it. At the time, we hadn't seen any of that behavior. I did not know that he would try to alienate gay and transgender people. I did not know that he was going to try to shut down Disney Special Center. You know, people sometimes end up not being what they said they would be when you vote for them. With all due respect, that's why I'm running. I voted for you, and I don't think you've turned out to be what I voted for. So, no, I wouldn't support him again, not when he acts that way, but when I did it, he hadn't acted that way, and he was identified by the FMA as somebody good for the delivery of medicine.
Well, let's be honest. When Ron DeSantis was running for governor, he was carrying the flag of Donald Trump 2 years in. We all remember the commercial, him playing with his kids, build the wall, ha, 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 that's funny. That wasn't funny to me. I had the judgment to know exactly the types of things he were doing. And it's not just Ron DeSantis. And let's break down. Supporting Ron DeSantis got him elected. That's been terrible for our community. When we look at HB1, we look at him attacking Al Lawson's district. Al Lawson's now running against Neil Dunn. Dr. Bellamy, financially supported, Neil Dunn. Dr. Bellamy, financially supported, flipped the House completely to Republicans. I don't hide from who you've supported. Embrace it. You can be who you are up here. I think that's okay. But let's not act like we didn't know who Ron DeSantis was when he was running. Let's not act like we didn't know who Neil Dunn was. Let's not act like we don't know what flip the House to the Republican Party means, because these things have real consequences in our community.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank both of y'all for being here. My question is, since we understand that we have a problem with violence, and looking at all the studies over the United States, the root of the problem is poverty. And each one of y'all said that y'all are willing to address the issue. So my question is, y'all, are y'all willing to set aside $2 million to directly deal with poverty over the next 5 years, as we made a commitment to put $1 million aside to deal directly with gun violence?
Yeah, absolutely. $2 million isn't enough, though. $27 million goes to Doak Campbell, $80 million goes to Northeast Gateway, $60 million to Bannerman. Things that can address poverty. It's not just earmarking something for poverty. It's making the right decision on every vote that's cast. Walk down West Tharp Street, you'll see dirt paths where people walk because there aren't sidewalks. That's a blueprint project that was ranked ahead of the developer special interest projects that got bonded and skipped the line. When we look at the needs on Orange Avenue, these infrastructure projects affect poverty directly, but we can't look at it just as, do we need $2 million? No, we need to take $27 million and dump it into housing. We need to look at every city-owned lot, 400 plus acres, give it to people who can't afford to buy a house, give them the land for free. If we can give Doak Campbell $27 million, let's put people in houses for free, give them the land, hire builders that live here in these communities. You don't have to search nationally for somebody who knows how to build the house. There's people in our community that can do it, but they don't have access to the same capital that everybody else has. They don't have access to the same money to build it up front. We could provide that relief up front. It would put people in the house. It could build intergenerational wealth. It could support local Black businesses, all for the same money. We're just throwing $27 million to Doak Campbell. You have to be deliberate with how you spend your money. And we do disparity studies at OEV to see if we should spend more. But if you want to spend more, you could just do it. You don't need a study to tell you. The wealthy developers, the people dumping monies in campaigns, didn't need a study to say money should go to their companies, right? We need to spend money deliberately in an honest way to help people. Thank you.
Dr. Bellamy.
I am willing to spend whatever it takes to fix poverty, $2 million and up. If you fix poverty, you fix everything, and you will get a return on your investment. And every dime you spent fixing poverty will come back tenfold.
All right. My good friend Stanley Sims is going to ask the next question.
One question, Sam.
Boom, shakalaka. My question is about accessibility to City Hall. Currently, I'm the only citizen in the city of Tallahassee with a no trespassing warrant, with no system or avenue for relief. I'd like to know personally, how do you feel about one authority figure having the ability to keep citizens out of City Hall, and what would you do to remedy that situation? I did good?
Go ahead. Whichever.
Sure. Stanley, if you want to come to City Hall and come to my office, I'll escort you personally. As you know, when they tried to trespass you from City Hall, it's your constitutional right to address your government. And I was the one who sent the email to make sure Stanley would have access to come to public meetings, because it's your right. And they knew it was your right, and they backed down and allowed you to come to public meetings. As far as access to other offices, I think that's wrong. That's bad. That's the city manager. He's a bad city manager. I've been calling him a bad city manager for years. And Dr. Bellamy won't commit to getting a city manager that wants to do the right thing by the people. And that's the problem. If you can't identify that we have an underqualified city manager that was handpicked by Scott Maddox to do the bidding of developers and want to change that, I don't think you'll get back into City Hall. We need a new city manager.
Dr. Bellamy, did you want to answer that?
Get someone with any authority to invite you on City Hall property, and he'll nullify the trespass warning. You're welcome at my house anytime, though, Stanley. That's not right. Somebody like you brings more to the meeting than the people that are issuing the trespass warning. I know some people like to say, "Oh, here comes Stanley," but I think you bring a tremendous amount to that meeting. You've asked pointed questions. You ask important things, and it's not okay that the city doesn't let you go to those meetings. In general, it's hard to go to those meetings. I don't know why. When I watch them, the citizens get 3 minutes to talk at the end, or maybe 3 minutes during. We've got to find a better way to get citizen input. When they get 3 minutes to make their point, and it's at a time when nobody really cares anymore, that's not all right. As far as the city manager goes, I'm not running in this to fire anybody. If I win, I will tell the city manager I expect him to treat subordinates with respect. I do not like what happened with the firemen. The answer to a public records request is one of two. It's not a public record, you can't have it, or when do you want to pick it up? So I do not like how that happened. My goal is to fix crime and poverty. I will tell him if he can work with me and help with that, that's good. If he becomes an obstructionist, I'll be first in line to ask him to leave.
Thank you. Anyone from the internet?
Hi, my name is Bill Tucker. At the risk of wasting my opportunity to speak to a very critical issue, gun control, and the mess that's happening in Duvalda, Texas. Warren Burger and John Paul Stevens. Warren Burger was a former Supreme Court justice, you know that. And John Paul Stevens, a retired justice, both spoke out against the Second Amendment. Now, I don't hear many politicians calling for the repeal of that. That's the crux of gun violence. That's what's at the bottom of the entire issue. If we repeal that, then we can get rid of a lot of these problems. I just wonder how you feel about that. I know that's a heavy lift for a city commissioner or county commissioner to go down that particular road, but somebody needs to say it.
Thank you, sir.
And we need to start somewhere. And why not now? And let's go after the real problem. New Zealand, Australia, and the Brits have gotten rid of these kinds of problems. We're still doing it. We're having a killer, a murder, a mass murder every single week.
Thank you, sir.
So right now, if Jeremy were to bring up a gun control legislation for the city, he would get arrested because the state has made it so it's illegal for the city to do anything that controls guns. I am a big believer in local control, and that's wrong. So it is hard to do anything as a city commissioner. I own guns, not a member of the NRA, but I believe strongly that at some point, gun owners need to realize if they're not willing to compromise on some gun control that's reasonable, they may end up losing all of them. It is time for universal background checks. I'm okay with registering my guns. If the government shows up to take them back, something bad has already happened. So I believe that gun owners need to get ready to compromise or they risk losing all of their gun ownership. I wish the city was allowed to make its own rules, but again, the state has made it so that's illegal. I think maybe even an arrestable offense.
We need to continue to push back and fight back against the aggressive overreach of state government on local government. Yes, there are issues with local control that have been preempted by the state. Dr. Bellamy's absolutely right. However, that doesn't stop us from speaking out. That doesn't stop us from advocating before our legislature. And I think he's right. There's plenty of reforms that need to happen immediately. You know, I once served on a jury for a young man, and he had a gun that he bought from a friend on the street, and he had it concealed legally. But since he was being pulled over, he didn't even realize that you can legally just purchase a gun in a private sale in Florida, and that wouldn't have been a crime. So he tried to hide it in a way that got him arrested. I just say that to say our gun laws are so lax that people think what is legal is already illegal. At the very least, yes, we can require registration. We can require background checks. and we can reduce the amount of guns on our streets. Our country is obsessed with firearms. We have way more firearms per person than any other country, multiple firearms per person. And where do they end up? They end up on the streets. They end up in cars that are not locked, where people can steal them. You know, sometimes these guns get stolen more than one time and they just get back into circulation. So we can do better. We must do better. But again, Dr. Bellamy is right. As far as local ordinances, currently we're preempted by state government to pass one.
Okay, we have another question from our online audience. This is from Jerry Say. She asks, will you make sure that the city bus system will go to the new Amazon facility, as currently it does not? And how would you do so? We'll start with you.
Sure. So this is something that should have been addressed before Amazon was ever recruited. How are people going to get there? It's happening on the tail end. The city's currently in debate because it's outside of the city limits. So it will take the county to come on board to provide funding, because the city of Tallahassee can't serve people that live outside of the county. It has to come from the county. But I think we can get that partnership done. You know, people are gonna work there. These aren't people making a lot of money. You know, these are warehouse workers, right? They're not necessarily living right next door. But on that note, Bellamy is getting built right next door, and we need to make sure we're building housing that's affordable for people that work at Amazon as that comes up. But the developers coming to the table right now, I don't believe are even considering that. So the transportation to get there is important, but as well as building communities that make sense on the front end. And that being said, we need to stop investing so much money in roadways and make our public transportation better. While it has improved some over the years, I can still remember being a kid, showing up to the bus 2 minutes early and seeing it fly by, and there's not another route for 45 minutes. If you're in that situation, it's now you're late for work, now you're getting fired. If we don't provide adequate public transportation, it has real consequences for everybody. And I hear Amazon fires people by computer, so you won't even be able to explain that the bus was late. So yes, I would try to help get access to Amazon.
For our residents in 32304 to be employed by Amazon, we need two things. We need transportation and childcare. If you can't have your kid go somewhere for the day, then you can't work. And if you can't get there, you obviously can't work. There has got to be some way to have a common departure. It could be CK Steel Plaza, it could be the new bus station that's being built, I think off Orange, somewhere on South Sea, where they're building a new facility that will have daycare at, I believe it's Orange, close to Monroe. If you don't have daycare for the workers and you don't have transportation, we cannot employ the poorest people in our city. And what may not be the best job in the world, but at least it's a decent one with benefits.
All right, thank you. We have another audience question, and then we have about 30 minutes or so. So if you want to kind of shorten your answer, so we have probably about 6 or 7 more people that want to have questions.
Thank you, Mataki. My name is Margaret. You all briefly covered my first part of my question. So, Dr. Bellamy, in October when you filed, you stated you had no intention of hiring professional campaign staff. You already addressed that you decided to retain the campaign management of Reggie Cardozo, the former executive director of Scott Maddox's governance, and his former campaign manager, the shell company at the center of the FBI indictments. How did you decide then upon your treasurer, Andrew Gay, who's also John Daly's campaign manager, who's also the Chamber's treasurer, who is also of Grimsley CPA, who is also a lobbyist at Capitol Hill Advisors? Reggie Cardozo and Andrew Gay combined have registered more than dozens of PACs. Many of them were seeded by Duke Energy and out-of-state billionaires like we hear about with Ron DeSantis. I agree with you, is my point. I've heard you say really cool things about Citizens United, and you've already accepted PAC money.
Please ask
so
your question.
will you, my question is, you have already accepted the PAC money and you've stated that you don't know what to do to stop it. Would you be willing, sir, to just say no to any PAC money from your team if they are building their money on the very things that we read about in the news that are so disconcerting to many of our residents? And the same, because I guess,
Thank you.
If there was a way to ensure neither side was doing it, I would be happy with having a PAC rule. I don't know how you enforce that, though. It is dark money.
All right. So I have a short question, but I am going to read it. There's an educational psychologist, and her name is Garcia, and she wrote, reducing the achievement gap in schools would require more than just raising the quality of schools that serve low SES students to the level of the high SES students. It would require creating substantially better schools and community environments for those low SES students. This may happen when small scale schools and community projects are able to close the achievement gap to some degree. So my question is, what kinds of small scale projects could you offer or that are already in place for you, Commissioner Matlow, that would elevate these communities for which impoverished children live?
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And that's absolutely right. When we talk about poverty and the achievement gap and future success, that has to be one of our priorities. Dr. Bellamy supports politicians that want to take money away from our schools. That's wrong. We have to fund the schools that we have. We have to support particularly our public schools and make sure they have the resources they need to succeed. And then we have to look at those special projects and where does that money come from? Most people know that I was opposed to the Children's Services Council because we didn't know where that money was going to end up. But a lot of people said that money was going to be spent on early childhood education, being able to have a direct funding source to build these types of things. Then we saw the first batch come out and money did go to the Chamber of Commerce. They've never been a children's services organization at all. So we have to control the money that we have. And yes, the city's not going to fund Leon County schools. We're not going to fund public schools directly. But I do believe that there are things that we can do in tandem to shore up different programs in the same neighborhoods. I'm a huge proponent of not selling our public land so we can use it for the public benefit. That's what we should be doing with public land, trying to find partnerships with the people who are trying to close the achievement gap and offer it to them. Instead, we're not doing any appraisals, we're selling it way too cheap, and we're putting up more student housing. I was a huge advocate to buy the Town South Shopping Center, and by the way, was a champion of making sure it didn't become a police station because it was going to take away a grocery store in the area. If we keep these public resources and we purchase more, then we can set up those partnerships and say, we want to provide space, we want to provide land, and we want a partnership with you to build the vision. But I do think they're not our constituents yet because they can't vote, but every child's going to live here, and we have a responsibility to care for our children as well as a city.
Dr. Bellamy, did you want to respond?
Again, the way to fix schools is to fix poverty. There was an FSU professor who did a study years ago, and the #1 indicator of school performance was the percent of kids on the free lunch program. Fix poverty and you'll fix education. In the meantime, I think one thing we can really focus on are after-school programs at our rec centers that come with tutors to help their children do their work. I know my child, I have to get a tutor for her after school about 2 out of 5 days of the week. If we had more tutoring at a place where kids could go after school, I think we could help with that. And that's something the city does have control over. As far as a reference to funding private schools, I am not in favor of waivers or vouchers that give partial funding to a family. To give somebody a $1,000 voucher does not help the poor people. It just helps a rich person save $1,000 who is sending their kid to that school anyhow.
All right, we have another question from online. This is from Yada, who's the president of Melanin Mothers Meet. The question is, let's see, I got it. Okay, infant mortality rates are skyrocketing in our Black communities, and healthcare providers have a heavy bias towards Black women under their care. It needs to be addressed at this level. What are you all planning to do to address Black maternal health? Bellamy, you can take that first.
Healthcare in general is hard to get. Even if you have insurance, if you don't have transportation, you can't get to the doctor's office. one of the best things we can do is find a way for people to have access to their doctor. Dr. Spurgeon Williams here in Tallahassee was the one who made it so that poor people can see a doctor under Medicaid when they are pregnant. Before then, if you were pregnant, didn't have insurance, you were on your own, and you showed up at the delivery time with a sick baby. He's the one who fixed it, so that the second you know you're pregnant, you can get covered by Medicaid. And that's actually one of the only Medicaid programs that pays so much that doctors want to treat them. So we've got to have available access to the doctors. Maybe that means getting the doctors to the impoverished areas for part of the time. Maybe it means finding a way to help transport the patients to the doctor's office. But they can get coverage. And maybe some of that's education, letting them know you can get Medicaid, almost no questions asked if you're pregnant. So the issue is making sure that the women know they can get coverage, and then finding a way to make sure they use that by getting to the doctor, even if it means city transportation needing to step up and help.
The way to address these issues are to elect and fund candidates that want to deliver on them. I've proudly supported candidates that have supported Medicare for all, because everybody needs access to health insurance to be able to go see a doctor when they get sick. My opponent donates to campaigns in an entire party that is against expanding access to Medicare, against expanding access to Medicaid. That's wrong. If your values line up with your political contributions and votes, we can make real progress and real change. But it's always perplexing to hear that social issues and poverty's care matter, but when you spend $30,000, it's for people who aren't advocating for those issues at all. There's just a disconnect there for me. But when we look at local issues, we need to spend more money. It goes back to that. All of these things come to funding, and our priorities are way out of whack. Just this year, facing a budget deficit, our city manager gave hundreds of thousands of dollars of raises to top level executives, many of them approaching $200,000 a year. We have to stop. We have to start making our priorities these issues in the community: access to health care, building affordable housing, raising the wages. When we do that, that actually delivers for people. It's not just talking about it, it's doing it. It's not just showing up after a lifetime at events like this, or showing up in communities and churches suddenly caring. It's about being there all along and fighting for what matters day in and day out. That's what I've done my entire life. That's what I've done my entire career. I've been a fighter for this community ever since I've been on the city commission. So to directly answer that question, we're going to prioritize the needs of the people over the needs of the special interests and developers.
And I'd like to say that it should be noted that I held a fundraiser for Alan Boyd after he voted for Obamacare.
All right, good evening. I'm Willie. And I had a question. Well, I wanted to do a slight correction first, because it was said earlier that youth in poverty have not seen or don't know what success is. And I want to correct that, because they know what success is. It's just defined differently based on what they see every day. Like these youth that were just out here. I'm pretty sure if I brought them in and said, hey, those two men up there, and I don't know if you've seen more people shot than everybody in here, because I'm from Jacksonville, and the last time I was there, 4 teens got shot in the car. So, but I do know that y'all probably make more money than everybody in here.
Question.
And if we would have brought the youth in to see that, we would have defined their success would have been different. And so my question is, because I've learned that overnight, if elected, you won't become a fighter of the people. You was either that before then or you weren't. And so what specific things, and not fundraisers, but what specific things have you done prior to today to help youth or to help community become better out of this so-called poverty? Because if you attend enough of these debates, you'll know the right things to say. And I can say I'll put $2 million to it. Matter of fact, I'll match your $2 million. That's how easy it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so the question is, prior to wanting to run or having the aspiration to run, what have you done for the community and for youth specifically?
Thank you.
So again, the main thing is being the chairman of the board of a school that says to any parent, if you want to come here, we will find a way to pay for it. And we do. That's the main thing. I had a child that went to graduation, and he stands up to, at the end of it, when they get to make a little announcement, each kid gets a chance to speak, and he looked at the principal and said, I want to thank the principal for saving my life. Because before I came to the school, I was going to prison, and now I have a free ride to college. So that's the main thing I've done to help children on the South Side. The other thing is what I do for a living. I often don't get paid for what I do, and I don't send people to collectors. If they don't have money, I just write it off. I am treating somebody right now who lives in poverty who tore their Achilles. I made sure they got everything they needed for free, and I'm not billing them. So yes, I've been involved in taking care of the poor in our neighborhood for a long time. Again, it's lonely at 3 in the morning when you have somebody that can't afford to pay you, who's broken their hip, and you have to fix it. And I've been there time and time and time again.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And I mean, you just make such a fantastic point, because it takes the community working together to help children find achievement. I always point to my own history, and while I had some legs up just based on who I am, I also had a hell of a lot of support from the community. If it weren't for public housing, if it weren't for CRA investments in my business, I can point to a lot of things and people in my life that I was able to connect with that guided me and got me to where I am today. We engage with a lot of local nonprofits. I'm a huge supporter, work with the kids, provide pizza and funding for Carter's Corner. I work with Kingsman's Club. When Project Bridge came before the city commission in tears looking for funding, we reached out and went and worked with her to get the money to get through the summer. I mean, it's when you see it and you can impact it, you have to step up and do it. And it's not just in our role personally as individuals, it's what we do as elected officials. I know you were instrumental in the Tallahassee Futures Leader Academy. My business hired young people from that program. And currently, I was actually flabbergasted. We're trying to raise the minimum wage at the city of Tallahassee to $15 an hour. It's currently $10 an hour, but the people making $10 an hour are the kids working the summer programs. Put $15 an hour in the pockets of these kids. That's direct impact. It's funny, we're at Dade Street Community Center. One of my first jobs was here. I worked as a camp counselor at Dade Street. Had it not been for the city of Tallahassee providing that opportunity, I wouldn't have had a job that summer. I believe I was 15 years old. But that money didn't go to buy Nintendos. It went to help my mom pay the electric bill when it got shut off. It went to help my mom buy food. Well, people have to realize, if you've experienced it, you know what people are going through. And it's not talking about poverty and dollar amounts. When you say people don't need $15 because it's just a summer job, those 15-year-old kids are helping their families put food on the table. And if you can see through that lens, every decision you make as a city commissioner, you can impact people's lives.
Thank you. And I'm just remind you, we got about 10 people that have questions, and we got about 20 minutes. So let's kind of shorten the answers if you can. All right.
Thank you. So now that we've heard what you have done in the past, we want to know, what would you do if you were elected tomorrow? The top 3 things that you would do for this community here on the South Side, and how would you secure the 3-2 vote?
Whoever want to start.
Sure. I'm working every day to secure the 3-2 vote. I see Adner Marcelin in the back of the room running for city commission. I fully support his candidacy. We need people who don't just talk about it, but they are about it. That's what we need on the city commission. But what could we do immediately? Day one, we're going to fire the city manager and get a city manager that cares about the people. When we do that, big change will start happening, and it'll start happening quickly. I can tell all of the people who've ever approached my office, ever approached city government with a plan, with an idea, that get rejected because they don't have connections. We can't sleep on that. That is instrumental in how we change our government. We have leadership that responds to the people. So that's number one. Number two, we talked about earlier. Let's put $27 million into housing. Let's do it right here in Griffin Heights. Let's do it in Frenchtown. Let's do it in South City. Let's give some money to Providence. I'm sick of us bragging about $6 million in bond that took 4 years to develop and then give $27 million to Campbell Stadium. Why is it that neighborhoods in need are always told to go draft a plan? Nobody did a stadium first plan to decide how to fund Doak Campbell. So let's take $27 million, purchase property, build houses, do it with local developers, put the money, put people in housing, and put people to work. Number three, let's raise the city minimum wage to $15 an hour to compete, so people working in our community have access to that. And four, let's listen to our minority chambers of commerce and the questions they have about helping Black businesses. When we have Black businesses that come to us and say, I don't because I don't have the capital or my company is not large enough, so I have to go to a white-owned firm and be used as a subcontractor, divide those contracts up. Do the plumbing separately, bid that out separately, find a Black plumber, find a drywall guy. We can do that. If we're intentional about it, we can fix that. We can redirect how money is spent in our community. But again, if we're funded by people who don't want to see change because it's threatening their livelihood, why would they want to give it up? They want to elect people that are going to continue to look after their interests. That's why I'm proud. I'm funded by almost 1,000 people. Only maybe 5 of them gave $1,000 because my friends don't have that type of money. And I'm not looking to have friends like that. I'm looking to my community, the people I've lived with, I've served with, the people I worked with my entire life. And together, we're going to change the city and we're going to change what the future of Tallahassee.
So I would say poverty, crime, and affordable housing. And again, most of that gets fixed with careers, good jobs. First thing I would do is I would demand that the city start treating every neighborhood the same with the services it delivers. I was at the Griffin Heights neighborhood meeting the other night, and they were saying, wouldn't it be nice if they would take some medians here and put some grass on there and plant some flowers? And I was thinking, well, you know what? It's not much of an ask. They do that on the north side. We need to demand the city treat every part of town the same way. There was a program for a little while, COVID ended it, where certain areas of the city were sort of roped off on a map. The citizens were met with and said, what do you want? What do you need? A month later, the city came back and met with them and said, here's what we're gonna do. This is what you asked for, and we'll regroup in a month. They had Public Works come out and fix every gutter. They had roads come out in that one area and fix every pothole. They made sure every street light worked. They had Parks and Rec come clean up every empty lot. They had Solid Waste come pick up every piece of junk on the abandoned lots. And they told the police, this is your home. When you have a report to write, you come write it here and sit down here. A month later, they met with the neighborhoods and they loved it. We need to start marching across Tallahassee with that, expecting the same for every neighborhood that the neighborhoods on the north side get.
Thank
you. Okay, hi. This is going to be difficult for me, so I'm going to try to do it without getting emotional. I've spent my life in service, community service, working with mental health, those experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, addressing the needs of our veterans, and law enforcement. I've walked in these shoes of having a sister murdered, and yet I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe that you won't meet with the chief of police, that you have allowed guns to be used and kill our children. It's been 1983 for me, and my PTSD is definitely triggered tonight, but I need more from you. Anything that's failed has been on your watch the last 3 years. My question is, do you plan to meet with, what do you plan to do with gun violence, the issue of gun violence in their community? Because it is a commodity, just like selling drugs. It's a commodity. It's a source of income.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. I've met with the chief of police on multiple occasions. I can't direct the chief of police to do anything, and I share your frustration. I see it too. We hear from people all the time. Many of us have had friends victims of the violence in Tallahassee. That's very real to me and personal to me, and one of the main issues that I am focused on. And I think it does speak to a little bit of the leadership issues we've seen. And I don't want to harp on the city manager, but when he's quoted as saying, "Let all the mother shoot each other," that's a huge problem for me. If that's what's coming from the top, what's filtering down below that? So, but I 100% agree. It's 100% on the shoulders of the elected officials. Every crime that takes place in our community, every act of violence, that falls on us, and we must do better. And I'm going to continue to fight to do better. The status quo cannot maintain.
Thank you. Did you want to respond at all, Dr. Bellamy?
Again, we need a city commissioner who looks at every day as their sole job is to fix crime and poverty until we beat it.
We've talked about using tax breaks and other incentives to lure big business to Tallahassee. Do you think there's a comparative benefit to investing those resources to foster conditions that help local businesses grow? And what should we do to create those conditions?
No, I think it's a great thing to invest in our local businesses. I think we've got to do a better job of making sure CRA money truly goes to people that need it. Some of the organization that's required to get CRA money might make it so that a business that doesn't have a lot of resources can't even get to qualify for it. We need to do a better job of making sure, again, that it's not like a school voucher given to a rich developer who's going to develop anyhow and just looks at that CRA money as an extra $50,000. So we do need to focus on making sure our CRA dollars are spent on local businesses that want to stay here. And if we do invest in helping companies come here, it needs to be in an organized way where we can see the return in investment if they're able to employ the people that live in our impoverished areas.
Chairman.
That's absolutely right. We got to focus on keeping local wealth in local hands. Local businesses are the backbone of everything. Every outside organization that comes in and hires and makes profits takes that money directly out of our community. When we support local businesses, that money gets recirculated in our community and builds local wealth. I championed the CEDAR grants during COVID to put money directly in the hands of businesses that needed it. Hundreds of businesses had access to that. It saved a lot of their existing businesses. And as I said earlier, I'm a product of government investment in local business. And I didn't get $1 million, I got $10,000. What if we gave 1,000 people $10,000 or $50,000? What kind of impact will we see then? That's the way we need to be thinking when we think about the future.
Hello, I just want to know if you support Thomas Whitley's, I guess, pay raise, you could call it.
It would be nice, it certainly looks like the heir apparent was hired. It would be nice if they would make sure that the job description fit the person that's about to get the job. I don't know exactly what he's going to do. I don't know what is expected of him. At the end, if he's able to do a good job and deliver, then it's probably okay. But if it's another assistant city manager that we don't need, then it's not necessary. But I do agree, it is a little suspicious that he gets hired when apparently he didn't meet any of the criteria on the request for applications.
Right, and I'll be brief. It's not about the individual. It's about how he got there. There's huge HR problems in the city of Tallahassee. They're well documented. HR staff saying policies are just words on paper. You know, it's okay to hire brothers and family members without competitive. We got to put an end to all of that. And again, it's at the city management level. The gentleman didn't get the job himself. He was given into it. Why? How did that come about? The public should know.
Thank you. So we have about 5 more people in about 7 minutes. So we're gonna get everybody's question.
Lightning round.
I'll be quick. 27 days ago, Gain Street Pies East posted a job listing for $10 an hour. I'm just curious, you spent a lot of time talking about $15 an hour. Why are you so willing to advocate for something that you're not willing to do in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Willis, I'm happy to if you saw yesterday's commission meeting, I completely prevailed against the ethics complaint filed against me. It was completely frivolous and thrown out. But the fact is, in a tipped environment, the lowest paid employee at one of my restaurants makes 50% more than the lowest paid employee in the city of Tallahassee government. And I'm a small local business, and we provide health care for everybody. But I push back because when we start attacking local businesses, it has a real impact. I worry every day about my staff because they have to put up with people who want to take their political leanings out on my staff, right? During COVID, they got shouted down and yelled at because of mask mandates and the positions people were taking. We had to ban the word abortion from our email accounts because my staff was getting flooded with emails. So I take a little offense. Please don't bring my staff into a political debate. We're talking about what needs to be done in the city of Tallahassee, and the city of Tallahassee does not pay as well as I do.
All right. Did you want?
Thank you. Next question. Quiet, please.
So this is just a small iota of a suggestion for homelessness folks on the street. Dr. Bellamy, you alluded to the fact that the state has certain mandates against city government and what they can and can't pass and what you can override and what you can't. But what I would like to hear you address is the shelter situation, because there's such a thing as a high bar shelter and a low bar shelter. And one of the big components of people staying on the street is they don't want to go to a high bar shelter because they know they're going to get checked for warrants and they're going to need proper ID. So that cuts them out of the places for them to reside, even temporarily. And I think that that's something the state is not going to give you a heartache with if you change those rules on an individual basis between high and low bar shelters. Just make everybody low bar, give the people the place to stay, get them out of the woods, get them off the streets.
Question?
No. Would you support that, or do you think that there's a way of getting through that?
Thank you.
I have no problem with that. And I remember, I'll admit, I don't know what happens at Kearney Center, but at the old shelter, nobody had their backgrounds checked. I don't know if they make them do it now, but I have no problem with that. I think we have to understand where these people are coming from when we try to find a way to house them. And to provide them housing that they're unwilling to accept or unable to accept isn't realistic.
Spend the money and put people in houses.
Hi, Serenity Williams. Nice to meet you. So Dr. Bellamy, I heard a lot from you tonight about, trying to solve poverty with getting people jobs, $15 minimum wage. But I also hear that you're very close with very powerful people, people with a lot of money, people with businesses, employees. Do these people hire off of Basin Street? And are those jobs unionized with $15 an hour?
I don't know where they hire their employees. I will say that so far, one of my best fundraisers has been Jeremy. There's been several people even that have supported him the first time around who feel like no success has been made and they're supporting me. So many of the people that have contributed to me, I don't know. Many that contribute to me, I haven't talked to, but I don't know where they hire their employees.
We need the businesses, especially on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce, to step up and hire some people that need it. Stop coming to city, county government for handouts and do your part. Help us employ people.
Thank you.
All right, this is some question, and these are ideas for thought, so if you can't answer it now, that's okay. Something to think about and take with you. Yeah, we've mentioned gun control. And yes, the Second Amendment grants individuals a right to possess a firearm. We've also mentioned development and trees. There is no right for a tree to exist. I wonder how you think those two rights should compare, whether we should have a right for people to carry a firearm, whether you think we should have a right for a tree to exist for its full life. As I said, these are questions for thought. Our Constitution does grant one of those rights. It doesn't grant the other. You think it's maybe time to have a new constitution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I am for significant changes to gun laws. As far as the right of a tree to live, trees define Tallahassee. I love them. But again, I stand by this. If it takes cutting down a pine tree to house a poor child, I will pick the poor child every time.
It's just a false choice. We can build housing for people and protect our environment at the exact same time. It was the road projects that people come out to take big trees down are the same projects that are taking down people's houses. There's not a correlation there, but because there's so many, how many large parking lots from the late 80s and 90s exist? We just bought Northwood Mall. There's barely a tree on it. We can build housing, but yes, we have a duty to protect. I mean, some of these trees are 100, 200, 300 years old. That it adds so much value to our community. The water it takes out, the rainwater it takes, that makes it where we don't have to store it in ponds that get polluted, the air quality issues, all of these things. That's what makes healthy communities, and it helps our health on the tail end. So we have to protect our environment, and too often it seems like protecting our trees to the city seems to just be an obstacle they have to get past, rather than a duty that they want to achieve, that they want to protect. That has to change. I advocated for the tree commission. That was one of those 3-2 votes, I believe. I do think we should put something like that back into place and protect what makes Tallahassee special.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Broadway. I'm a Democrat. I'm also a member of the Democratic Party. And one of the things as a Democrat, to me, that's of the utmost importance is that people that are running as Democrats for elected office or sitting in office as Democrats live and walk our values. One of those enshrined values, in my opinion, is the passing of the Voting Rights Restoration Act in 2018. And I have a question for Dr. Bellamy. You gave to Republicans that obstructed that amendment after it passed. And I'm wondering if you can justify it, and if you can, how do you assure everyone in this room that we can trust your judgment when you've made such grand mistakes supporting those people? Thank you.
Again, at the time I gave to them, I was giving because they had been identified as people that were good for delivery of medicine. They had defended doctors against hospital lobbyists and insurance lobbyists.
Just to follow up, when you
Quick,
can't,
very quick.
you just can't look after your own interests, right? We have to look after everybody's interests when we vote. There may be politicians that are good for pizza shops, but I shouldn't vote for them just because they want to take away people's voting rights. It's an absurd thing to say. Your vote, your funds matter.
Cool. Dr. Bellamy, this is a question for you. I volunteer for a lot of candidates at the city and county level on signage. I've noticed one thing when I've been out and about lately, and I'm reminded of a quote from my good friend Dr. Whitley, which is, "You can tell how a campaign is going to be run by where its signs are put. Sean, Jeremy, and Diane's signs are in front yards. Your signs are littering the south side and southwest Tallahassee, and I want you to know that that should be addressed."
Question.
Will you stop doing that?
There are signs for everybody everywhere, and we will put them where it's legal.
If you like a sign in your yard, go to jeremymatlow.com. There's a sign up. We'll deliver it directly to your house. Gentlemen, can we calm down?
I'm good, thanks.
Commissioner Matlow, this question is for you. When discussions about where the new police station will be moved, you've opposed to having it located on the south side. Isn't it true that police presence does reduce crime. Isn't it true that homeowners and residents and citizens on the south side are possibly more susceptible to crime in that area? So why wouldn't you do all that you can to protect the citizens on the south side who do want safer neighborhoods and who do want crime reduced in their area?
Sure, and I think a police presence does displace crime. It moves crime to different areas. I think that's a fact. But I'm responsive to my community. There are issues with taking away grocery stores and restaurants and businesses in that shopping center and not replacing them. And it wasn't done with community buy-in. It wasn't done with the neighborhoods. It wasn't done. What we need our police force and our community to act in tandem. We can't decide we're going to place a police station and take away a grocery store without large-scale community buy-in. So there was a lot of pushback to getting that done, and I'm proud that we got it relocated. I'm extremely proud of that. We delivered on something the community was asking for. Does that mean we can't address crime in the area? No, a building doesn't stop crime at all. Our officers are routinely spread out across the city. But what I have advocated for in its place is to purchase that same property and return it to community benefit. Have it available for small locally owned businesses. Continue to have grocery stores like the car wash that's getting run out across the street by Dr. Bellamy's donors. We have to protect people and support people, and that's how we move forward.
All right, so we got two final questions. I know we're right at 8:35, but last two, and we're gonna wrap it up. So go ahead.
So, what's the attribute about your opponent that you admire the most?
It's a nice suit. No, I mean, I do think it's his integrity on the answers. When he was asked about his contributions to DeSantis, he didn't hide from it. He said, "I do it again." I disagree on that position completely. I've come from a different political spot, but be who you say you are, and I think Dr. Bellamy does that.
He is tenacious.
I don't know what that means, but
I mean, it's a compliment.
I'll take it.
All right, and I have a two-part. Okay, the question is, how would you? One question. Okay, how would you stop developers from coming in and destroying African American history and culture?
We got to buy the property. Ownership is what matters. If it's for sale, there's not a whole lot we can do. If it's current zoning and it's allowed, there are certain things we can ask, but ownership is key. When you own your community, you control its future. We need to continue to put the neighborhoods that are at risk of gentrification, buy more property, put it into community hands, keep it in public control. When we do that, they can't build it because it's ours.
Again, careers. People with money don't get displaced. And I think we need to work ahead of time on the areas that we know are at risk, changing zones and rules so that later on it's already set in place when a developer comes and looks.
All right, thank you, everyone. That concludes our forum for tonight. I want you to give a round of applause for Dr. Bellamy and Commissioner Matlow. So again, I want to thank you all for coming out. As you can see, this is a very passionate community. All our friends and guests and supporters who came out, everyone's passionate. We all care about the issues, and we're going to keep doing these forums. As my brother Mutaki Akbar said earlier, we are unapologetically Black, and we are going to ask questions about issues that affect our community. So we'll see you at the next event, everyone. Please have a safe night. Thank you.